This podcast may contain disturbing content for some listeners. It's intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. This is True Crime XS.
This week, we're sort of going back in time a little bit to cover a couple of cases that actually took place in Washington. Because Israel Keys confirms throughout the interviews that he has killed some people in Washington. And he sort of points the federal investigators towards his boat and this knife. And there is DNA recovered from one of the knives there, according to the FBI files, and you can read them yourself in the FBI vault. I found this interesting article, and I would have shared this with you, except it's like behind this bizarre paywall I couldn't figure out. And it's from November 30th of 2020. And I was really kind of taken aback. This is BellinghamHerald.com. So this is, a Washington paper. And it's the only article. It didn't go out on the wire. It's not repeated anywhere. The article itself is by a guy named David Rosbach, and it's from November 30th, 2020. And it says, it took more than a decade, but remains found in Whatcom waters finally identified. And it says, more than a decade after a man's remains were found in the Salish Sea, 8 miles west of Whatcom County, the body has been identified as a Canadian man who was reported missing in 2009. The Snohomish County Medical Examiner's Office, working in partnership with the British Columbia Service Special Identification Unit, or SIU, used DNA to positively identify the remains as having belonged to 55-year-old James Newfield from British Columbia. This is from a Royal Canadian Mounted Police press release on Monday, November 30th. The BC Coroner's Special Investigations Unit, working with our partners both in BC and south of the border, is pleased to have been able to finally bring closure to the family, helping them get answers to questions that they have been seeking for more than a decade. And that is the director of the SIU, Eric Pettit, in the press release there. Newfield was last seen January 21st, 2009, when he left his Penticton home in British Columbia in his 1997 Plymouth Voyager. His van was located under the Alexandria Bridge near the Fraser River on February 3rd, 2009 by the Hope RCMP, and it was examined by forensic specialists. So that's, British Columbia. Although they weren't identified for more than 11 years, Newfield's remains were recovered May 23rd, 2009 from the Salish Sea near Parker Reef, located approximately a half-mile north of Orcas Island and 8 miles west of the western edge of Lummi Island. The San Juan County coroner took the remains to the Snohomish County Medical Examiner for anthropic and forensic analysis, the release states. But the body could not be identified, despite efforts to trace a number on a metal plate that was found in the body. They were trying to basically match that up to medical records. They tried to use the body's DNA profile to find a match or develop a sketch of what the body may have looked like for identification. No success. At first, I was confident we would find his identity and family right away, said San Juan County Coroner Randall Gaylord, adding that his office was frustrated when the case went cold. Gaylord credited Jane Jorgensen at the Snohomish County Medical Examiner's Office for recognizing that DNA record keeping has improved and it would be worthwhile to renew our search, but to take it to Canada. This case highlights not only the international multi-agency cooperation that takes place between Canadian and U.S. officials for cross-border matters, but showcases the sheer dedication of our investigators in bringing answers to James Newfield's loved ones, said the RCMP Southeast District Executive Assistant District Officer, Superintendent Ray Carfanton. I just thought this was interesting because it shows how a body could pop up in Washington that has nothing to do with Washington or any of the missing people in Washington. Not only that, it doesn't even have anything to do with the United States. Keyes talks about Canadians not counting in some kind of anecdote that is referenced, but you really can't find it. It's redacted as far as in the FBI files themselves. Even in the vault files, it's redacted. It's not mentioned. I think I've come to the conclusion that except for maybe this one time in Montreal, early in his killing career, I don't think Keyes killed any Canadians in Canada. What do you think about that?
I've never thought that he killed. So you just said that, and I was wondering now in my memory, I remember him saying that, but you're saying that that didn't happen?
Well, no. So he talks about Canadians in the course of our interviews, but apparently he said something more telling. Like he talks about Montreal. He talks about going up there and guns being a big deal. He definitely talks about that in the interviews. I have not specifically heard him say the words Canadians don't count.
Okay, so we read it then.
We read it.
Okay, so the memory, I could be just constructing him saying it. I have that problem.
That doesn't mean it's not in like a Dateline or something. It just means that I did not hear it in the audio interviews I've listened to of Israel Keyes. I didn't hear him say the words Canadians don't count.
Okay, and I thought I had, but I'm going to go with you on that. I know there's a lot of things that through other sources, it's like they were very telling things, very specific things that ultimately it doesn't appear that he actually said any of those, some of those things. And so with the Canadians don't count thing, I took it specifically. I felt like he was thinking that the weight of anything he did in Canada, it would not help his prerogative for where he was and what he was doing at the time. I think that he was very nervous.
That's what I was going to say.
Going into Canada, and he wasn't a Canadian citizen. I just feel like he probably, got into some trouble. In fact, he says he got into trouble, but I don't know that he killed anybody in Canada. And that whole Canadians don't count thing, to me, it just seemed like a sensationalized, made up statement almost.
I've scoured Montreal news articles for a couple of different time periods where I felt like I could probably attribute him going there. One of the things I noticed is I don't have any border records of him going in that side of it. So it would have been he would have gone in illegally anyways. And the other side of that is, well, there's a language barrier there. A lot of the news and reports are in French in that particular area that I was looking in. And I mean,
were you looking in Montreal?
Yeah, I was looking I was basically going over the border from, I think he would have gone like over the border from Constable. So that I was looking in, I expanded it out a little bit to see, okay, how far could he drive here and get away with it or walk here or whatever. But ultimately I don't, the other option I have is sort of when he goes up to move to Alaska. And I played all of that out in the first season as far as like what my thoughts were there. But ultimately, I have not been able to connect him specifically to anything. I found a couple of there was a missing couple. That was a Valentine Lake couple. There's some things that I felt like he might be good for, but not on the eastern side of things above New York. Most of that was like closer to Alaska. And realistically, I have no proof he did any of those things. I can't place him near any, it has to be something where it's completely off the radar.
Right. And the time period he would have been traveling into Canada, I don't know how great the records are. Not to mention, I'm not entirely sure that who keeps the record of who's going into Canada. It seems like that might be the Canadians.
Exactly.
But coming back into the United States, it seems like
it would be our job.
It would be our job. But I also know that I've been up to that part of upstate New York, and I've crossed the border there both before and after sort of the border laws changed. And I know that you could be in a vehicle and there's absolutely no way that Border Patrol knew that I was in Canada because I was a passenger in somebody's vehicle and they didn't take anything from me.
Well, okay, but the border law changes you're referencing, you're talking about when it was tightened down post 9/11.
Well, it seems like I am, but for even after 9/11, which would be 2001, we were still able to go across the border, and not everybody in the vehicle didn't have to show their identification. So
Interesting.
and so I've experienced that. Now it did tighten up, like it. So okay, and part of this, the reason I know part of it is because I had a very small child family up there. They like to go over to eat like right over the border, and so I didn't have anything with my that said anything about my child as far as like a driver's license or a birth certificate or a passport or anything, right? Because I didn't think about that when we were going on this particular trip. I wasn't thinking we were leaving the country. I was thinking we were going to New York, right?
Right.
But we still were able to go back and forth over the border without any problems at all. So that would have been much later in 2000s. And I'm just saying, it just depends on the situation. I feel like I would have been crossing very close to where he would have crossed.
Yeah, because you're coming out. What is that, Malone up there that you were at?
No, it's Messina.
Okay. Yeah, I think if he was crossing legitimately, then you guys basically would have crossed in almost the same place. If he was just wandering
Right.
through, like he had a destination in his head that he like knew was there, but
You have to cross the St. Lawrence River to it's not a land crossing.
No, it's just a bridge, right?
Right, but I'm just saying, he would have had to cross somewhere.
If he crossed legitimately, like he didn't go through the water, he didn't go through the woods further east, then he probably crossed in almost the same place that you did, border crossing wise.
Probably, yeah. From my experience, that there's times I've been in Canada that there's no record I was in Canada. That's my point.
Oh, okay, I gotcha.
And so I feel like there's other people who have been in Canada that there's no record that they're in Canada.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And that could absolutely apply to him. And the reason I know that there's no record of me being there is because I didn't give them anything that would make them have a record of me. And I didn't have anything for my child. So I know for a fact they have no idea he was there,
Right. At first I thought you were referencing like when he was younger, you thought maybe his parents go. I thought that was the correlation you were making, like his parents would have had him in the car.
I'm just saying that. No. What I'm saying is, I know that I was very nervous that something was going to happen, but they're like, "Oh, we want to go eat across the border." And so, I go, and there was no problem at all. They didn't take any identifying information. Of course, I'm sure they had perhaps a reading of the license plate.
Yeah.
Of the vehicle we were in, maybe.
Or a log, like a video log sometimes.
Or something. But I'm just saying, the security where I went over, I think that Keys could have been in Canada a lot, and there's never going to be a list anywhere about it.
Right. So all of that having been said, it's not that I've given up on Canadian things. They do quite a bit in the, if you look in the vault, like if you go in the FBI vault, they frequently do outreach up there trying to get the different RCMP detachments to sort of take a look at. It's almost like a presentation they give over and over and over again. In that presentation, where they send this out to, and they send it out to different federal agencies, particularly agencies that have more federal jurisdiction than they have state connection, meaning reservation areas, tribal lands. They describe what they think some of the killings are. And those have always sort of made me curious because as far as the FBI is concerned, they believe he has at least 4 victims in Washington state. And you and I have listened to this guy talk so much that I've stopped dropping in his clips at this point. But he speaks to people. He speaks to 2 agents from Washington state later on, possibly October, before he kills himself. They ask him about Julie Harris, but they don't ask him about the Emersons. And over time, you and I have sort of gone through and ruled in, ruled out some different people when we're trying to develop our own list. And, we've looked at that list from a couple different perspectives. One is like, did he only kill 11 people? The 11 people in the Baphomet that he has drawn in his cell, that represents the whole of what he's doing. It's like his dozen, with himself being the last kill. We've come across a couple of interesting cases out there that we've sort of gone back and forth with. I had a couple of extra odd cases that I've never, meaning they're not the main two for today, but these two extra cases that I've taken a look at. And one of them came back on my radar because they, suddenly make their way into NamUs. I always find it odd when someone, like, there's this weird feeling when I'm looking at a 2004 case and I click down on it and it's entered into NamUs in 2013 or 2014. That makes me think, what's going on there? But even weirder for me is when a case ends up in NamUs in like 2020. And that's so one of the cases today that we are interested in for the moment is actually that kind of case. It's a very difficult case to research. I have found her in a couple of different records, like back in the 80s. But as far as her current situation, she basically appears in court every year of her life, past the age of 16 or so.
Like criminal court?
Yeah, these are criminal court records and civil court records. Things like evictions, restraining orders. There's lots of stuff that's going on where she is mentioned as a plaintiff or a witness or a defendant in different matters.
Just real quick, he talked to the Washington agents on October 30th.
So they were October 30th with the Washington agents. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I don't think I realized it was that. Oh, you know who I'm thinking of? He talks to ATF earlier, doesn't he? That's what I was thinking of, where he's talking about the different gun setup he had with the silencers. Yeah, I think that's what I was thinking of, was the ATF agents instead of. But the Washington agents are a male and a female, right?
That's correct. And
okay.
Like I said, October 30th.
Okay, so that is good to know. When we look at Washington, there's not a lot going on in Keyes' time that we look at and go, oh yeah, that sounds like him. We talked in season 1 about a lot of different Washington cases that some were more well-known and some are less known. These two cases, we didn't mention one of them because we had never found her. We didn't mention the other one because we weren't sure of the conclusion of the case, and there was a lot of extra digging that had to be done.
Right. And so you were talking just a second ago, and I was looking, so I didn't add. But I would like to know what your thought is on these cases showing up so much later.
Well, so I had this point in time where, and I can't give you a really good example right this second, but I probably could with like not much effort. I've been looking through NamUs since NamUs was the thing. I think you know that.
Yeah, I do.
And I follow a lot of patterns of how people do their entries. I can track down a lot of stuff in NamUs that the average person won't necessarily do. I report a lot of cases in NamUs. One of these cases I've actually reported for something different, but I'll explain that. With Keyes, I got very interested in Washington, Oregon, Vermont, and Maine and New Hampshire cases that went in suddenly. And by suddenly, I mean a 2001 case of a missing person from Washington State that went in on December 4th, 2012 was very interesting to me because it was very close proximity to the time they'd been talking to them, to Keyes. And it was very close proximity to his death. So I wondered if there was a list somewhere that they were putting in there. It turns out that really what that was they have a rolling, even now, like in 2020, they made another one of these calls where they have a rolling tip line for keys, and they are developing different cases. I get fascinated by what goes in after they do that. Like they make it these all calls, they make an appearance on 48 Hours or Dateline or whatever. When they do that, I get curious about what goes into NamUs from these areas after that happens. And last week we talked about Dennis Rogers, and Dennis Rogers was one of those cases, as well as Mark Reinberger, in weeks previous, and even Rosie's case on Arlene Bell's case. Those cases don't make national headlines. Those cases pop in the area. They're briefly in like one or two local papers, and that's it. They're gone. They don't get mentioned again. A lot of times it takes, Dennis's case took years to get into NamUs. I think his case was 7 years old when it finally got put into NamUs. I can't help but wonder if, like, along the way, authorities thought they knew what had happened and they realized they didn't. And those cases become more interesting to me.
Well, and so I was interested to know what you thought, because we've been working on this case since like 2013, basically, and with Israel Keys. And so we did the case with no intention of doing anything. Then, like in, the year and a half leading up to when we began the podcast, we had like really intensely searched. Okay, but we had all the information. And so we were doing the podcast, and then we took a break from that and we did other stuff. And having gone back to it to do the summer season, I realized everything has potentially changed, and it's based on the passage of time, new people popping up. It's
old people's cases being solved.
I didn't look. You told me that you were doing it, and then you like sort of showed me, because I don't know if you realize this or not, but like before we started on Israel Keys' case, I was actually done with it because I really just do not like this guy. But it's interesting, but I don't like seek things out extra wise. But then I realized we could start all over again with the developments in people being found. People have gone missing that, they're put in 10 years later. I think most of the people that we've talked about this summer are new finds for us, at least, as far as like how they line up so well with Keys, and how from 2013 to 2020, we had no idea these people even existed and had a case that might possibly have something to do with Israel Keys. And that is so fascinating to me.
The first case we don't have much information on this person. I will explain what I'm talking about when I say tip at the end of this, but this is a very small blip on my radar that came about because of a couple of things. One, she has court records, and like she makes her court appearances. Like even though she like gets in trouble, she makes her court appearances. The charges are mostly minor.
I was going to say, usually if it's something major, you don't get to continue having court issues. You're in jail eventually.
Right. And that's where I looked for this person. And honestly, like I found her in the weirdest place other than NamUs, and that is like a really old, these people are missing police post that got shared. I think I showed you the imagery of it. It got shared through like an old Telnet group. So, it's not
recent.
Yeah, it's not recent at all. And it's terrible looking. You can barely, but it's got a list of people in her area that went missing and her name's on the list. Because I actually, I have a thing about missing persons cases that I get pretty cranky about. And that's when the police use a missing person announcement to locate a wanted person. And that's usually to fool his family and friends into coming forward and saying, or her family and friends to coming forward and saying, oh, I know where he is. I saw him the other day. They do that in different places of the country, and I'm not a huge fan of it.
But I just want to say, technically, like, they are missing.
Well, they didn't show up for court. They're wanted, but that doesn't mean they're missing. They're just missing to the cops.
Yeah, well, I mean, I could...
They have failed to appear. Like, that's a different thing for me than a missing person. So I wondered, go ahead.
They had to have tried to get in touch with them. I mean, it's got to be a little more than just not showing up, right? Or is that really all it is? Because that would be wrong.
So people in this girl's shoes are like Shannon Lathrop. This girl had a probation officer. At some point, she was calling that probation officer, and she showed up for everything on time. Like Shannon Lathrop, like one of the reasons that she was eventually going to be reported missing, even though she wasn't, she was going to be reported missing because Jerry Reed, her probation officer, said, why did she stop calling me? That's weird. And, she's about to get off of probation and go, make her last appearance for the judge to be let off of everything. And she comes up where nobody's seen her for a few days. And then it turns out that she's beside the burning boat out on Lummi Reservation. That type of person is very similar to this type of person, which I think what made them stop looking for this person is explained. This is a little woman. She's 5'2", 120 pounds. Her name is Sally Jo Stromberg. Sally Jo is last seen on August the 12th, 2005 in Yakima, Washington. What I think made Sally fall off the radar is that in December of 2005, someone used her EBT card to buy groceries in Granger, Washington. And she had lived a transient lifestyle. She had lived a transient lifestyle similar to Heidi Rink, who we talked about down in California. What's weird about Sally's case is that she doesn't go into NamUs until November 6th of 2020. So at that point, Sally has been missing for more than 15 years. And she goes into NamUs.
Do you have any idea when the initial missing persons report was made?
She was reported missing in, it looks like October of 2005, there was a welfare check done. But they weren't totally sure where to go looking for her. With Sally, I think the official missing persons report looks like it's early 2006. And I can't tell who filed the official missing persons report, but I can tell you that she was put on a list in 2006 of people who had been missing in the area. Okay. But with her whole situation, when that EBT card gets used, they stop looking for her for a little while.
They think she's just gone. Do you feel like she used her card? Do you have any idea? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I can't tell. I don't think she used her card. I don't think so.
So her case for me, it really isn't one I would take a whole lot of interest in typically because I can't find any information really. It's just she's sort of, she was missing to somebody at some point, right? And it seems like it was by choice that she was missing. So I went two ways on this. You brought the information and she has a connection to the next person we're going to talk about as far as around the time she was last seen. Because while her EBT card was used in Granger in December of 2005, there's no information that it was her. They don't say she used it. They say it was used, right? And so her date of last contact remains August 12th, 2005.
Right.
And so because of that, it's relevant to our episode today for me. But I wasn't able to find hardly any information about her. So I don't feel like I could go really one way or another as far as she possibly being somebody who had the unfortunate circumstance of encountering Israel Keys.
Yeah. So I tracked her around I started in 1990. I was able to start tracking her in the Yakima County District Court in 1990. She also appears in Skagit County, Lewis County, and Yakima Municipal Court, and then Toppenish Municipal Court. So I can basically follow her path through her criminal record. These are all infractions, by the way. There wasn't anything super serious in what I was looking at for her in these municipal court hearings. I can't see all of them, so someone could come back and say, "Oh no, she had this." Well, yeah, that's possible. There are multiple Sally Strombergs with criminal records in Washington, but their middle names are all different.
When Sally went missing in August 12th, 2005, she was 46, right?
Yes, she was 46 years old.
Right. So she was born in what, 1969?
Would have been, no. She was 46 in 2005. Mm-hmm. So back out 5 years, right?
That's
and then
2000.
And then you got to go, okay, then go back 41 years. So it's 59.
You know what? I'm going to clip all the places where we do math and just put them all together so we can listen to it.
TCXS Common Core Math.
You're right. 59.
So,
pardon me.
No, it's fine. She was born in 1959. She's my parents' age, like almost. It's hard to think of her that way because
at first it's of course nobody can see her picture, but the picture that they have in Nemeth, it's clearly like it's her blowing out a candle on a birthday cake, and then I think you found one more picture. With all the infractions she has, there's ne'er a mugshot, I believe.
Well, that's what I was saying. That's why I think they're mostly...
Yeah, you don't get a whole bunch of serious stuff. If you get too many serious things, you are just in jail. And clearly, you did check to make sure she wasn't in prison, right?
I did, yeah. So in 2005, she stops being a defendant. And
just all of a sudden.
Right, yeah. June 2005, she shows up for court, and then she just, drops off the map. Now, normally, okay, it sort of gets into semantics, legally speaking. One part of the semantics was her EBT card was used. They didn't say she used it. They said her EBT card was used, which makes me think they know it wasn't her. They're just not sure if somebody just picked it up or if it was traded for something else. I assume that some of these... Yeah, or they just found it. I assume some of these charges in here are going to be minor possession type charges, vagrancy, trespassing, possibly solicitation related to either drugs or prostitution, because otherwise I could see them if they were more serious charges. So she's got enough of them that I did look in the Department of Corrections just to make sure that she wasn't in jail in Washington State. She's not in jail.
So that's
Washington
not the
State.
case.
Right.
Okay. She was last seen at a restaurant. Was that right?
Yeah, she was last seen at a restaurant, but they didn't say if she had worked there or if she was
eating there.
Right.
Okay. And so I went two ways with this. One, I feel like it's a very interesting take on what we're going to get to in a minute. And then the other way I went was I started looking at found bodies, unidentified found bodies.
Okay.
And I found a body that was discovered. The date body found is January 27th, 2007 in Mount Vernon, Washington. And this body is also 5'1". And the age range is adult pre-50, 24 to 46 is the estimated age range. She was 46. The estimated year of death is 2006. And I don't know what they're recreating here with this picture. I don't know if it's I don't know if the wig is relevant. I don't know, because they don't give that information. But Sally is the best match based on the
United States.
Yeah, based on the information we have, Sally is the absolute best match for this unidentified body. time wise, description wise, location wise, everything. I feel like before anything else could be said about any thing to do with Sally, I would need this to be eliminated as a possibility.
Yeah. So the interesting part about this is she had brown hair. That was a weird thing to time together with everything else. Because I agree with you. Whatever's going on the head of this, I couldn't tell if it was like a wig that was styled to look like
I don't feel like that could have been the person's hair. Like
it's very generic. It is like so middle of the road brown hair. I was very confused.
But if you look, so close to that body, and I'm talking, and Sally was definitely time wise the closest, but in proximity wise, nobody else has brown hair. Everybody else has strawberry blonde or gray hair. And that really I was like, wow, that's amazing that, because normally you'd be able to find lots of, brown headed people. It's a pretty common hair color, but Sally was really the only one who matched with all of the check marks.
Yeah. So the only thing that's weird about it is, according to the cold case files that I was able to dig up on this. All right. And I just want to explain what they're talking about here. These remains were discovered near the North Fork Bridge of the Skagit River on a place that they call Fur Island. The Fur Island is bounded on both sides by essentially the Skagit River on one side and the Puget Sound's Skagit Bay on the other side. So this area floods a lot. What I was confused about was they knew the time of death was sometime August to September of 2006, they said. The teeth were located. They were able to put back together essentially a dental record. So it is on file. They believe that she's either Asian, Native American, or Hispanic. And that threw me off because I wasn't 100% sure how they made that determination with what they said they discovered. Now, the examination of the remains don't indicate like a bone count or anything. And they've done a clay reconstruction. So they at least have her skull or a part of it. The thing about it is her NamUs profile seems to be more recent and names her as 5 feet 1 inches tall. Back then, when they found it, the medical examiner wrote that she was somewhere between 4 feet 11 and 5 foot 4. So I don't know what changed there.
I went off of strictly what is in NamUs. And I just want to point out that listed in NamUs are a sweater and jeans and a bra and underwear and shoes. And that makes me think that like a lot of the body was found.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they said it was found on the body. So I get into this predicament that like she's a good candidate for Keyes, but at the same time, the body is found either with the clothes or clothed. That immediately makes me start going, would he have done that? Like, would he have left the body with the clothes?
So that's why I was like, I went two ways with this. Because this is one of the ways, the possibility of this being, I would want to compare and exclude Sally Jo Stromberg as being this unidentified body that was found. And if she was excluded, I would move on to my next thing, which based on the timing of when she was last seen and some of the things that Israel Keyes said, I have used probably my wildest imagination here to match them together. Actually, I'm not sure if I did or you did. And we sort of tried to make a couple here.
Yeah. So what we were thinking was she goes missing on the same day of someone else who falls into this bizarre category of why weren't they in NamUs when they were? This particular case interested me for a number of reasons. The first one is he has to be on the FBI's radar at this point unless they are not doing their jobs. And he is not mentioned anywhere in the FBI files that I've found. Have you found him in there anywhere, referenced? Even redacted?
He's not. He's not in there.
He goes into NamUs January 3rd, 2014. Sorry, I just wanted to complete that thought there.
That's okay. I think there's actually a few reasons why he's never going to come up. And they could be completely legitimate, and we could be the ones that are off the chain here.
Yeah, so this is the reason we didn't originally mention this case.
And actually, so leading up to this episode, I was talking myself out of it.
I noticed.
I just want to say, so he's one of the very first Wallies that I mean, it's mostly based on like Bill Owasco, but this guy, he is a very good example of the kind of Wally that defined a Wally in the Israel Keys case for me. But I don't know for certain. I've researched him a lot over the years, and I have different things that I've put together that sort of lead to this. However, this is a young man who he truly vanished in the wilderness. And I feel like the reason he's never going to come up, one of the reasons he may never come up, is because I feel like his family accepted that he had died basically through misadventure.
They were even instrumental in sort of helping to call off the search and having a memorial for him. And
right. And so it is with great hesitation that we present this, but it's just a thought because of sort of the hiker's experience, his age, his fitness level, all the stuff that happened. And ultimately, it's the fact that we know from records that Israel Keys, he took his maiden voyage either the very first time or at least the maiden voyage at Lake Ozette on July 30th, 05. We have records that he took a ferry from Kingston to Edmonds on August the 4th, 2005, which that essentially, if you're looking at a map, that makes him going from west to east across, to get over to from Nia Bay back over to like more of the mainland, right? Towards like Seattle and Tacoma. Right. Okay. So he's in that area. He takes the ferry on August the 4th.
Right.
And then the next thing we have available is that he's camping at Lake Ozette, which is very far west, back towards Nia Bay. It's on the coast almost, and it's just south of Nia Bay. So what I'm saying is he took a ferry to get east, and then he did not go back over on the ferry, but he reappears 8 days later at Lake Ozette.
With a camping permit. Yeah, that makes sense.
With a camping permit, he's camping with two other people, and they go out. I assume they go out on the lake with the boat. But my point is,
he didn't keep a record of that second ferry trip, so he took a drive around.
Right. And so because of that, so if you kind of have to look at Washington State to sort of understand where my mind went. But you've got him going across the ferry, and then he reappears 8 days later without having to go back across the ferry. Now, you can drive. You don't have to take the ferries across. It takes substantially longer, right? And so if he was making his way back, that's where this comes into play. And so one of the original Wallies his name is Zachary Weston. And Zachary Weston was camping and hiking at Mount Rainier Park in Washington State beginning on June 22nd, 2005, with plans of returning home to Connecticut August 21st, 2005. He was last seen dropping off a friend on Wednesday, August 10th, 2005, and was reported missing when he failed to show up the following day, August 11th, 2005, to pick up that friend. His friend alerted authorities that afternoon to his uncharacteristic absence. Zach's camp was located at Snow Lake Campsite, which is within Mount Rainier National Park. The car Weston was in was found parked at the Comet Falls trailhead Thursday night. A search began Friday and continued through the next week. At one point, searchers felt confident that they were following Zach's boot prints up into an area with an elevation of 10,000 feet. Those footprints stopped on a rocky ridge between two glaciers. Zach was known to be carrying an ice pick, but otherwise not prepared for full-scale glacier hiking or climbing. Zach is presumed by his friends and family to be most likely dead, most likely from a misadventure.
So this is about a year before Israel Keys runs a marathon. So he's in good shape. He's going to be in good shape. He's going to be getting in better shape to run a marathon. He ran a marathon up there in June of 2006. That's the Olympic Discovery Marathon in Port Angeles. When I picture Israel... Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, so Israel Keys said, I used to just let people come to me. I would go to places where I knew there'd be other people. I might not get what I want. And Zach is a skilled outdoorsman. He is actually up there with a friend. The friend is a female friend. I believe he had been hiking with his father previous to this. Is that correct?
He hiked and camped with multiple different people. They were just there for shorter amounts of time. He was there, like I said, beginning in June 22nd. And so he was not going home until August 21st. So it's almost a month that he was going to be there. And he had, I believe his birthday was June 30th. Maybe. Yes. So he was there for his birthday. He was out. And as time was going, people were with him, and then he was alone some of the time. And it was just based on who could do what when, right? Because I know his dad had been out there with him. Then he had a friend that he dropped off for her to go and do summit wherever she was going. So it was very like a loose sort of trip. He was just out enjoying nature. And I actually have a tremendous amount of guilt positing this, but I also feel like I don't know what the steps would be to like verify it. One of the things that I learned from Zachary Weston's case was Mount Rainier, people do go missing on Mount Rainier, but very few people stay missing.
Yeah, they're eventually found. And there's a good possibility that eventually Zach will be found.
Well, and I was actually, so from the time I first considered Zach, because Zach is a Wally, he was out and he disappeared. He was, it's kind of strange that he disappeared, like in all the times that he could have disappeared, he just happened to be by himself. Right. I find that odd. There is a possibility that somebody could have been watching him. There is a very good case that he overestimated his ability and he was hiking on a slippery slope and fell.
He'd been hiking for multiple weeks at this point.
Right. And it is possible that those weren't actually his boot prints. They have no idea.
That is a possibility. But one of the things I ran into with this case is that, all right, so to give you an idea of like what was happening here, there were 20 searchers on foot climbing, CLIMBING, looking for Zach. So just think about that for a second. They're not just hiking. They're also climbing and going all the way up. Zach's dad gets involved. So the clip that I sort of have here, and the searchers at Mount Rainier were combing dense forest, rocky terrain, and glaciers for 7 days straight with helicopter assistance, but were unable to find Zachary Weston. This is right after he's gone missing. His friend had gone for a guided climb, which you already mentioned, and he had planned to day hike while she was on her climb. He is not going far. He is day hiking while he's dropped this girl off. It's August the 10th. And when he drops her off, the plan is he will be picking his companion back up.
The following day.
Right. So this is not long. He's not going deep into this. She comes back to the campsite at Snow Lake. She sees the car, but doesn't see him. So she calls 911 to report him missing at midnight on August the 11th. Over the course of the next week, more than 20 searchers on foot and aboard helicopters looked for clues related to Weston's whereabouts in the rugged Mount Rainier backcountry. The search area was extended from the Nisqually Glacier west to Success Cleaver and from the Comet Falls parking lot at 3,600 feet up to 14,410 feet summit. The rangers investigating Weston's disappearance checked cell phones, they interviewed other hikers, they interviewed his campsite, and they talked to his loved ones. As the search progressed, more and more clues pointed towards this one cleaver called Whippawetty Cleaver, which is up around the Couts Glacier, and they thought that would be Weston's route of travel. A woman who gave him a ride reported he had talked about this route as the easiest path up to the summit. Searchers discovered tracks matching Weston's shoes ascending this cleaver to an elevation of 10,000 feet. Now, we don't know for sure that's what you're talking about, but we don't know for sure that it's his boots or not. They believe it is. This is interesting. On Thursday, August the 18th, Weston's father discovered a sleeping bag stuff sack, so like the outer cover of a sleeping bag, with a few of Weston's belongings in it at 9,000 feet along this route. Members of the family ascended to see for themselves if this was the area where Zach had disappeared. So, Incident Commander John Plashtuck, he basically said, "We've covered the search area thoroughly from the ground, from the air. Given the risks to searchers in such rough terrain, we're satisfied that we've done what we can. It's time to call off the search. We're sorry there wasn't a happier outcome for the family." They found some of his stuff up there. So I have trouble picturing what Israel Keys did with Zach. However, I believe that Zach is in Lake Ozette. I don't know. I think he took him away from the mountain, and I think he took him over to Lake Ozette and he put him there. And now don't get me wrong, there's distance here that I can't account for. Like, I have looked at this case, and they have him written off in a couple of official records. I think it's a data entry error as a suicide.
That's correct. And initially, when I saw, so as I've investigated and done research, I've learned quite a few things. And one of those is that, like, just because it says it somewhere, it doesn't mean it. So when I saw that he was a suicide on somebody's official record, right, I was very surprised. And we don't know, for one thing, we don't know how official the record was and how accurate it was. For another thing, I feel confident that even though he may have succumbed to a misadventure, I don't think anybody has ever posited that he committed suicide. And under the circumstances of the situation, it seems like he would not have done it when he did it. It doesn't seem like he would have committed suicide, but like to leave his friend hanging like that, it didn't sound like the kind of person he was, especially since, you know, he would have had other opportunities. It wasn't like he was leaving immediately.
I feel weird with his case, but I want to read this because I want people to understand what his family thought. Zachary Weston of Meriden is missing and presumed dead after a hiking expedition in Mount Rainier National Park. He was last seen August 10th, 2005. He was born on June 30th, 1983, the son of Cheryl and Delmer Weston. He's survived by his sister, his grandmother, his grandfather, several beloved aunts, uncles, cousins. He'll be missed by many. He was a scholar, poet, novelist, artist, musician, athlete, actor, filmmaker, and philosopher. He loved mountaineering, especially at Mount Rainier. He was entering his senior year at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, double majoring in aeronautical and aerospace engineering and film. He valued his family and close friends dearly. He will forever be loved, missed, and cherished. That is Zach's obituary.
So I think it's safe to say he was probably not suicidal.
No, I don't think the family considered him a suicide. I think best case everybody considers him a misadventure.
Right. And I think that, and I remember the record I saw, and I remember like double, triple, quadruple checking it, sending it to you and being like, is this say what I think it says? And so, besides the fact that I don't like randomly putting people's names out there as as potential serial killer victims, that was a kick for me to not say anything more because of the suicide angle. I researched it thoroughly, though. You and I have both come to the conclusion that we feel like that was a mistake or misinformation, or I don't think that anybody really thinks he was a suicide. It is possible he was just a misadventure, but I believe at the time I was doing the research, there's about four people total that have not been found, that have, suffered a misadventure at
Mount Rainier.
Right.
Yeah, we included all of them in season 1 just to talk about them, even if they weren't related to Keys.
Right. And so it is not a lot of people that go missing. He has been missing now for, we're coming up on 16 years, right? Yeah. Yep. On August the 10th of this year, or August the 11th. So it'll be 16 years. And so Zach, I was hoping he was actually going to be found somehow, and then it would just sort of put everything to rest. That still has not happened. It still could happen, but it's not a normal misadventure, even for somebody that might be hiking on a glacier and to fall or to, whatever happens to them. It's not normal for them to not be found, especially after 16 years. Yeah. They talk about how the mountain, as it goes through its different seasons, Mount Rainier has its own climate. Yeah. It's its own thing. And so the people who know that area, they talk about how the mountain gives back its victims. Right. And it's a process that happens. And without question, it gives everybody back, except I think it's 4. It's not many, however many it is. Zach is one of those. And because of the information we have based on Israel Key's timeline, his, what I think he may have done as far as going to Eastern Washington, driving himself back around to get back to the Western coast and to be at Lake Ozette with his friends. I had considered, now he went to Lake Ozette with his boat, and he had a permit to camp for one night with 2 additional people, so 3 people total. I actually thought he may have stopped at Lake Quinault.
Oh yeah, you're right. We discussed whether he went to Ozette or if he went to Quinault. Thank you for reminding me of that.
Sure. But so I'm not entirely sure. Lake Crescent is it seems like it would have been really far out of the way, but we know how he operated. Okay. And it's possible that he could have gone to Lake Crescent, but I feel Lake Quinault was more on the way back, and it would have been
halfway.
Right. And I don't know exactly how this went down, but my thought on it is, you said that Zach's stuff was in a sleeping stuff bag.
Yeah, because he was in the sleeping bag.
And was the sleeping bag gone?
Yeah, the sleeping bag was gone. I believe I've read. So I would have to have the inventory of the campsite, and they do have that. It is available. It's not available to me currently, but if I could see the sleeping bag was missing, I think he took the stuff he wanted to take in the stuff sack, put Zach into the sleeping bag, and carried him. That's my thought.
That was and so Zach's car was discovered. So his car was in the Comet Falls Trailhead parking lot. His camp was set up at Snow Lake campsite. And so I finally kind of got through all of that. And I believe it was there was an 8 mile distance between his camp and where his vehicle was parked. But where he was camping, like, he very well could have been parked there like the whole time. So he could have driven his friend and then went back there and parked and stayed parked there, even if he finished climbing whatever he was doing, right? What I'm saying is, like, there were certain things you would drive to, but there were certain things that you would just be parked at. And I know that Snow Lake camping, it doesn't have a area you drive right up to and park. And from what I could sort of tell, Comet Falls Trailhead parking was one of the closer parking lots. So it is entirely possible that his vehicle being there had nothing to do with anything else that was going on, except that's where he parked, right?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think Keys had anything to do with the vehicle either in this case. I think you would have had a tight timeline on those.
I don't. And so, but here's sort of where so, you imagine a kid hiking up through, and somebody grabbing them while they're hiking and trying to get them off a mountain. That seems like a very unlikely scenario, which it is. That's not exactly what I think happened. I think that like you said, he was more than likely taken in the middle of the night, and it was a lot more incognito than, we imagine with the typical taken hiker scenario or whatever. But I really wish, and, I can continue to wish that Zach will be found, and then it'll sort of put my thoughts on it to rest. However, I feel like under all the circumstances, Israel Keys could have absolutely been hanging out in Mount Rainier. There may even be something somewhere where he signed in and had a permit to be there. I don't know. But he very well could have been there. And the fact that Zach Weston wasn't at his setup camp at Snow Lake campsite, he had a cache of stuff. So he was going out for like the day and night, and then he would have been done the next morning and went back to pick his friend up. That's my sort of thought on it. And it's possible that Keys was hanging out and waiting for one of his victims to come to him.
Right.
And so, based on the time, I feel like Zach Weston could have been one of the Wally victims of Israel Keys. And then, because of the way he described his victims very vaguely, the fact that Sally Jo Stromberg was last seen on August 12th, 2005, it makes me wonder if he didn't come across her as well. And, we don't have a lot of information about.
We were curious if this was the pair or the couple. Is how
correct.
Yeah.
And so, she was put in Namath November 6th. I had never thought of her. I didn't know anything about her until you told me about her. Did you know anything about her before she was put into Namath?
Yeah, she's been on this list that I had. The problem was it was not a searchable list. But
I see.
So where she went missing to, how do we want to say this? To where Zach was to where Sally was about 80 miles. But basically, once you hit Ellensburg, Yakima, where Sally was, is south of there. But if you go north and like if you're going around, I don't know how to explain it. If you're going to go through Olympia and go around to the peninsula, not take a ferry, you're going to pass, like if you leave Yakima and go west, you would basically, leaving Sally, you would pass by where Zach was.
Right.
Does that make sense a little bit? So if Sally is the Fur Island body, it gets more complicated.
Right. Well, yeah. And actually, I didn't realize I'll have to look at what you sent me a little bit ago, but I didn't realize that it was a potential person who showed up after a flood. The information I had was that partially buried remains were found near the Skagit River, south of Mount Vernon. And so I don't know. I had thought maybe that was a mutually exclusive factor, meaning that if this body is Sally, that she's probably not a Keys victim. But now I'm not so sure. I don't know.
Well, Fur Island is back towards the ferry. It's actually north of the ferry. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Think Seattle and Everett. Fur Island is north of Seattle and north of Everett.
Right, and I would have to follow. If the body was moved by water, it could have come a long way. I don't know. I haven't looked at it.
All I ask of, I didn't report that as a match. I reported to confirm if they had excluded or not. Like if they had excluded
and
Sally. That's all I wanted.
I feel like that's a better way to put it, sort of.
Yeah, I just reached out to the medico-legal person there. So that's a weird place for me because the medico-legal person is actually also on the crime scene technician unit at Skagit County. So I had like their name, but they were the death investigator involved. Usually it's like a nameless regional person, but out there it's not. So I emailed and said, hey, I noticed this and this. Like, have you ever looked at these? And she said she'd take a look. That was it. But the point was just like, I think if you could exclude that, I would be looking for something over here. Because I actually think that you could find Sally close to Zach more than likely. Or if you found Zach, I think you could backtrack enough to find Sally. Maybe. I don't know.
I haven't ironed out all the details. I wasn't 100% comfortable putting this out here. I doubt very seriously anybody that knows Zach or any of his loved ones would hear this, but absolutely no disrespect in saying it. It's just a thought. As more time goes by, I feel like, there could be some resolution here, even, if it is a misadventure and the mountain gives back its victim. But,
alternatively, evidence of Zach may be among the evidence recovered by the FBI because we do know they have DNA from a few males.
And that could be something that could be checked on.
Right.
And I've never heard anybody say a word about him with regard to Keys. He is a Wally, and he is somebody that fit sort of the scenario that Keys put out there about letting his victims come to him.
Right. And once I was able to confirm that he had definitely not been considered a suicide officially anywhere, and it was a mistake that someone had made, but once I was able to confirm that, I felt like I sort of twisted your arm into this, and I'll admit that. I wanted to release his case as part of the Washington victims as part of the Cruel Summer episodes because I felt like his case was important.
It is important, and I really would like for Zach's case to have closure, and I'm not trying to make it more painful closure for anyone. It's just there's not a whole lot of cases that have this sort of dynamic that goes along with them. I'm sure you know that by now. I look very, very hard into things before I put it out there. And Zach has been on my list from the jump.
Yeah.
And so you've hinted at bringing him up a couple of times, and I've said, no.
Yeah.
And
we had a couple of cases like that, but I think his is probably the biggest one where once I looked at how it could have gone down and then how Keys kept it.
Israel Keys he was more than likely in that area at that time.
Yeah. Once we looked at him being in that area, because he goes east. And the only thing that we could think of was he was picking up a girlfriend.
I have no idea what he was doing. No idea. But
all we know is he goes east and doesn't have a good reason to come back west.
Well, and he shows back up at Lake Ozette without having taken the ferry back or anything.
Right.
Like, we don't know what happened. And during that time period, on a route he could have taken going from where he got off the ferry back over to end up eventually at Lake Ozette. So he's on the ferry August 4th and he's at Lake Ozette August the 13th. Plus, I feel like camping and that, I feel like he does that kind of thing immediately. And if we could ever put it all together, I think we would see like a cover-up mechanism here where he was trying to, like, I couldn't have possibly put that body in Lake Quinault. I was at Lake Ozette. How's that work? That kind of thing.
Right.
And I feel like that's something that would be seen if we could get all the pieces together. I don't know that that's ever going to happen.
Thank you for joining us for our Cruel Summer episodes, where we go back to looking at Israel Keyes. We are sponsored by LabRottiCreations.com. You can check them out at LabRottiCreations.com, and you can still use the code CRIMEXS for a fun pop pet portrait of your own pet. You can also reach us on Twitter, Instagram at TrueCrimeXS, or you can give us a call if you know anything about any of the cases that we're talking about at 252-365-5593. You can also reach us at Gmail at truecrimexs@gmail.com, and you can check out our website at www.truecrimexs.com. We'll see you next time.
This is True Crime XS.
I don't know how many more episodes we have about Israel Keyes that we're going to do. The amount of information that we have is sort of dwindling. But what I do know is that next week what we're going to cover is what Meg and I think would be the best approach for the FBI. Now, the FBI has blown me off about Israel Keyes, so whatever. But next week's episode, me hunting around and doing what I do and us putting our brains together, which I guess Meg jokes that it makes one whole brain, we came up with what is probably the best way to figure out what Israel Keyes was doing. I don't know if anybody will ever do it, but we did figure it out. So that's next week.
Tell me, do the seasons change? In your mind coming in with the rain. Tell me, does it feel like home? Let it in, let it go on now. Pull it close to give it up somehow. Tell me, do you stay the same? If you could just see me now, would you believe it now? Clouds breaking, the sky spilling over. I'm coming clean in the water. You were just holding out for everything you got now. Come close, you can lean on my shoulder. We're coming clean in the water. Tell me, does the light get low when you're left with the world all alone? Tell me, does the time slow down? Let it in, let it go on now. Feel the change to what it's all about. Tell me, does it all slow down? If you could just see me now, you would believe it now. If you could just see